All right, we're gonna try this again. Hey, everybody, going live for a little bit to talk about a Lego drone kit that I've been playing around with. It's actually been kind of a interesting day because when we went to go watch my kid Ruby over at the Spring Fling, the garage door went halfway down and then stopped. So I wound up having to actually take the garage door opener apart. And after many a Google search and looking at the logic board with a magnifying glass, found out that one of the solder points had apparently burnt out somehow. And all I had to do is take a soldering iron and put a little dot of solder on there. And guess what? Whole thing started working again. So it got me thinking about soldering that I never actually shared this kit with you. So I thought I would take a little bit of time because this is a something that I purchased off of Kickstarter. It is called well, when I bought it, it was called the DIY Mini Lego Drone Kit. Okay, kind of a mouthful to say the least. And let me just slide this over just a little bit. There we go. So basically what it's supposed to do is give you a small amount of Legos and some motors and a drone controller, and then you can mix and match them to actually create a drone that will fly around. And then in theory, you could also create your own Lego frame and modify it and have some fun with it. So I received it in the mail about a week or so ago, and you can see this is the actual box. It's a company called Kitables. Inside the box, I will admit, it was definitely a very clean experience. So it came with like a nice box and then all that little wrapping crepe paper. Honestly, I felt like it was Easter all over again, and so on and so forth. And then you open it up and you've got all these different well-bagged, well-organized little pieces. Little bags of pieces. This is what all of them are, and you can see in there, the Lego pieces, some zip ties, some motors, two different types of motors, and I'll get into that. The controller, the main board, the battery, and then a USB charger. So I wanted to get the kids involved as much as possible in the build process, so I started off with Ruby and let Ruby build the actual Lego frame. And you can kind of see it down there. I mean, we're talking about, for about 16, 20 pieces of Legos, some real simple directions. You're basically making a plus sign out of them. So she pieced those together. And then I wanted Aiden to try and do the actual soldering, and he definitely did his best. However, the solder points themselves are pretty small. I'll show you them in just a second so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But they were a little bit tricky to say the least. And so, consequently, while he tried and did his best, it definitely was something that I wound up having to do myself. Give me 1 second. I'm just loading up Facebook itself so I could see if there was any questions or chat along the way. Here we go. So if you do have questions or comments, I'm going to try and look over there periodically and respond. So this is what it wound up looking like when it was all put together before I put the actual rotors on. So you can see the Lego frame, and then you attach each of the motors using zip ties. Basically, get them in as tight as you can, and then clip them. The one thing to note, actually, let me flip over to the IPVO so I can kind of rotate this around. So here it is. What you'll notice is on some of them you have these blue and red wires, and on others you have these black and white wires. And the reason for the two different kinds of wires are one of them are motors that spin counterclockwise, and the other is motors that spin clockwise. So you actually want these two to be counterclockwise, and then these two to be clockwise. And I guess due to the magic of aerodynamics, that's what you need for the drone to actually lift off the ground. And then the solder points, I'm going to try and zoom in. This was actually a little bit tricky when I was playing around with this before because I got to refocus the camera. But let's see if I can do this one more time and see if we can get it in there. There we go. So here's the solder points, right? Oh, I lost it again. Hold on, let me try one more time. Let's see if we can get to rezoom in. Here we go. So the solder points are right there. And I'm zoomed in really good right now. They are pretty small, to say the least, especially for 10-year-old hands. And considering there's other components that are, the concern was that, he was going to bridge them and so on. He tried it a couple of times, just didn't feel comfortable, even with a magnifying glass, so he kind of bailed on it. So you solder them on. So there's 2 solder points each, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then zip tie them over here to these pieces. And then this whole thing basically just sits right on top. And then you basically, they gave you some rubber bands so you could rubber band it to it. Now, you also have to have the battery. The battery came with a little USB charger that you can just plug right in there to recharge it. You get about 5, maybe 10 minutes out of it. And if we plug it in, you'll see it's going to start lighting up. And then the idea is you flip this over, you put the battery on the bottom, this thing on the top, and then you basically just rubber band the entire thing together. Now, if you're already thinking, wow, that doesn't seem all that symmetrical, and it seems like it would be tricky for the weighting and the height of the rotors and everything to get just right, well, that's sort of the trick. So this is the remote control that it came with. It's nothing really too fancy, but it works fine. I'm going to go ahead and power that on. You'll notice that this thing started blinking a whole bunch more. And then I can, let me see if I can get both of them in the camera at the same time a little bit. If I push forward on this, you'll see that they'll start to move. But you'll also notice that they don't necessarily always go at the same speed or at the same time even. So here's what I found. Okay, now mind you, it's not rubber banded in, okay? But if I tried to get this to take off, hopefully you're going to be able to see this. When I try to do some lift, you're going to notice that one end lifts a little bit more than the other, and you notice how some of the rotors kind of start and stop. And they don't seem to be sticky, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on. It may... I don't know why they're not firing off consistently at the same time, but more often than not, one end will wind up lifting more than the other, and I think it has to do either with the weight or with the height of the rotors. There's so many variables that could be a factor here, whether it be the height here, whether it be an issue with the connection, or whether it be the weight of where the battery is at, and the weight of where this board is at, that honestly, I tried for about a half an hour to get this to balance just right so that it would just fly straight up. I was never really able to do so. This is the controller for making it to go up and down. This one controls the side to side and the forward and back. I found that if I was really careful, I could adjust it to the side or fly it backwards just a little bit and then take it off. And if I did it just right, I might be able to get it to fly straight. But more often than not, it was always going off at an angle, which basically meant the kids couldn't really play with it. You know what I mean? The kids would always wind up having some issues. And very often, as soon as it took off, it would kind of skitter across the floor, and usually it would wind up trying to attack the dog. That just seemed to be the way of it. Rachel, yeah, I bought it because I thought the kids would absolutely love it, and I still like the idea of it. But here's the thing. The reason I bought it was I thought after I got this thing going and it was flying straight up and down, then I could start tinkering with the frame itself, adding different weights, trying to make it larger, trying to make it smaller, and so on. Well, I certainly couldn't make it larger because of the distance that these pieces, the motors, need to be. I mean, I would have to add wires, which isn't necessarily that big of a deal, but now all of a sudden we're certainly adding a lot of another layer of complexity to it. And given that I wasn't sure all the things that were going wrong, why it wouldn't just fly straight up and down, I didn't want to start messing with the frame itself. However, I will say, what that did get me thinking about was maybe the issue is the frame, and if I had a solid frame that was well balanced and took into account the battery and the board itself, so I had places for the battery and the board to get mounted completely centered, and that it made sure that the rotors, all the motors, were absolutely level, my hunch is it will fly a lot better. So to that end, we go back to the 3D printer. And that's what I'm working on right now. I found on Tinkercad, not on Tinkercad, I'm sorry, on Thingiverse, some 3D models of small mini drone frames. So what I'm trying to do now is take one of those frames that somebody else already built, and I'm trying to tinker with it so that it'll fit these specific motors, and that I can make the space to mount this specific board and this specific battery, and then try and see if I can get everything just balanced just right. If it does work in plastic, I actually have PLA. I'm sorry, not yeah, no, it is PLA based, but I have a steel, iron, and carbon fiber filament. And I have a hardened nozzle coming, so I don't shred the brass nozzle that I have right now. And ideally, I'd like to try and print out a little mini drone frame in maybe carbon fiber or something, and see if this thing will wind up working better. So the fact is, even though it doesn't fly great, I've got a controller, I got 4 motors, I got the board itself, I got the battery and the battery charger and all that for around $50. Okay? Maybe I could probably get it cheaper if I bought everything a la carte online, but it came in a nice package, and you saw it came in a nice box. The experience building it was, the time for me to go from 0 to actually getting it in the air was pretty minimal, and it all worked. So I can't fault them or say that they're ripping anybody off or anything along those lines. I know there's another company that does something similar called Flybricks. I actually have a meeting with them in about an hour to talk about their platform and how they do things differently. The one thing I did notice is their platform, they're not attaching the motors via these zip ties. They actually have spaces and custom pieces for the motors to actually sit in there, so I think that'll add some rigidity to it. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing their variation on it, but I love the idea of creating sort of that platform for the drone that then kids can kind of remix and play around with and move around and see what happens if they put both counterclockwise motors on the same side versus this one, or what would happen if you extended the motors farther out, put them farther in, and so on and so forth. Cindy, no Cubs hat today, even though they did finally break their losing streak. Anyway. All right, so that's about it for Kitables. I will just show you real quick. This is their actual main website. It's not the one I wanted. I wanted this. This is their main website. You can find it at kitables.co. They do have a few different kits. This is the one I'm showing you right now is their mini Lego drone. They have another one that is their Lego, not the Lego pack. There's the mini Lego drone, and there's the Lego drone kit. The Lego drone kit has more pieces, slightly larger motors, and a slightly nicer controller. I don't know whether it makes that much of a difference, but I will say this. While I definitely still have issues and haven't gotten great flight out of this specific drone, kits were well made, and the instructions were solid, and there was fine resources. I had everything. Not only did I have everything that I needed, I even have extra rotors and extra zip ties and extra pieces and so on and so forth. So I can recommend the kit. Just as long as you understand, this may not be this certainly isn't going to give you the same thing as what you get out of $1,000 drone or even a $200 drone. You're getting your money's worth out of a $50 kit that you can then tinker and play around with. So when I bought it myself off of Kickstarter, I believe. Actually, let me just double check. I paid on Kickstarter $50, and it sells right now. It's the same thing. It's $50, but it does say that it is out of stock on their website right now. This one is $50. The larger Lego drone kit is $69. For $19 extra to have a little bit more powerful motors and the better some extra pieces, it's probably worth it, to be honest. All right. Oh, I didn't even see this one before. Lego solar USB charger. I mean, listen, there's a million of these kits, and technically you don't even need a kit, but if you aren't, if you're a little concerned about making sure that you have the right parts, that they all go together and so on and so forth, this is a fine one. Just like I said, keep in mind, you do need a soldering iron, and the solder points are a little small. You know, kids can probably do them, but this might not be the easiest first one for them if they haven't done much soldering before. All right. Gary says there are $25 or $30 Japanese tiny drones that work fine. And yeah, programming drone is most educational. Yeah, this one obviously you can't program. It's intended. I mean, technically it's a quadcopter and not a drone because it can't do anything autonomous. You can't program it or anything else along those lines. But Gary, if you have any links to any that you recommend, throw it in there and I'll put them into the blog post as well. But that's about it for me for right now. We're coming up on the 16-minute mark. This is not up on YouTube. This is only on Facebook Live because I had some logistical issues, but I will be archiving and posting it up there later. And as always, there's going to be a blog post that will have some links and some extra screenshots and follow-up items and so on and so forth. So if you've used one of these kits and you've got some that you recommend or alternatives to this, please go ahead and throw it into Facebook or leave it as a comment on the blogs. That's it for me today. Until the next one, thanks for hanging out, and I look forward to playing with you again. Take care, everybody.